Oh, hey, King. Long time no see. I heard you were looking for a GWOT clone. But not just any GWOT clone, no. You want something short. There's nothing wrong with liking short things. My girlfriend likes short. Today, Kings, we are getting to the bottom of it. Which GWOT era CQBR is the best of all time? Oh, hey, King. I want to tell you about a new friend here of the channel. It's Badlands Munitions Company. Training ammo, pistol ammo. There's even match ammo. What's dope is, guys, they're based here in the United States, right out of Arizona. Everything, it's all made in-house. They've actually given us a discount code, 10% off for all the homies. No matter what you pick up, if it's ammunition, you're getting 10% off. Code 110SAS, check them out. Jays and Letterman, we are back. We are back! Back on our bullshit battle royale. Back on the menu. We have brought to you the 3 greatest GWOT CQBR rifles ever devised. Gentlemen, we have the Mk18 Mod 0, the Mod 1, and the HK416. Gentlemen, battle of the shorties. I like them short. So does my girlfriend. Lucky me. So we have compiled these 3 weapons, and we're gonna put them to the test and figure out which has the most drip, which has the most sensational amount of just aesthetic that make you feel so warm and fuzzy on the inside. But for real, guys, we're gonna test against reliability. We're gonna talk about accuracy of these firearms, the fit, the finish, and just how they feel handling as just an overall kind of CQBR rifle. Now, exactly what is a CQBR rifle? Well, it's always been known that shorter is always more gooder, right? No, but seriously, so we needed a weapon. We needed a firearm that wasn't 14.5. We didn't need a firearm that was 20 inches. We needed something very short and compact, mostly for those dudes kicking down doors. The guys breaking these rooms, they realized that, hey, these 14.5 rifles, they're just a touch too long, especially once we get a suppressor on them. We can't even fit through doors without bringing in our rifles and sacrificing a good positive grip and just overall control of these rifles while working through rooms. We need something short, especially in the global war on terror. So not everything was these big, wide open space kind of battlefields like it was in Afghanistan. Iraq especially, there was a lot of high value target hits done on compounds, small villages, things like that. And of course in Afghanistan as well. Now, one of the things that we found out, and we found out very fast, again, was that these 14.5 rifles, while they were fantastic as general purpose weapons, they weren't exactly the most ideal when conducting these high value target raids and so on and so forth. But the US military has always known that, hey, a shorter weapon in engagements that, well, are within 100 meters is going to always be more maneuverable, be higher speed than these longer musket firearms like the 20-inch, the A1, A2, and A4. Look at Fallujah, those poor dudes kicking doors down with 20-inch muskets. That's just not super ideal. They made it work. Those dudes, balls of steel. I don't even know how they got home on those airplanes. Those airplanes must have had super turbo double pumper engines carrying those dudes' gigantic balls back home. So in comes the CQBR, the close quarters battle receiver, not rifle. So I think that's kind of funny because my entire life, really, and before this video, I always thought it was rifle. But yeah, it's a receiver because it's an upper receiver group strictly made to slap onto your lower receiver. So yeah, CQBR. We're going to say that word a lot to shorten that down. So the CQBR Block 1. This is the typical global war on terror kind of vibes that you usually see. Guys like Chris Kyle carrying them in the movie American Sniper, so on and so forth, on his back. These guns are typically seen with an aim point optic. They usually have a PEC-2, sometimes a PEC-15 on there, depending on what year it is. They usually almost always, for some reason, have the big Knight's Armament broom handle grip, which I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of cool. I don't know if it's exactly relevant much anymore. I think the big broom handle grips have kind of just gone out of style because people realize I don't need to grip my carbine like this. Let's get a good C grip, C clamp over top of my rail. They also had a front sight post on there. That's pretty much exactly how it sounds like. Yeah, there's a front sight built into the barrel itself. It's not mounted to the actual rail. Much like the old Colt Commando, so it's just a short rifle. These guns were also issued with a rear iron sight as well. So the rear iron sight, what we have on here is an LMT. Essentially what it is just a modified and chopped M16A4 carry handle, machined out and, well, mounted to a Picatinny rail. Yeah, it's pretty intuitive if you think about it, because there was just hordes and hordes of these things laying around, because optics like the ACOG were coming into place and just becoming the standard optic, and, you know, them in the aim point. So we had all this surplus of them, say, well, why don't we just take these, modify them a little bit instead of just making all brand new ones and getting those bad Larrys on there. Perfect. So that moves us on to our next entry, the HK416. Now you guys know this gun. It is a very, very famous gun. It's a very popular gun, and for a lot of great reasons. It's a well-built, very reliable platform. But unlike the other two entries in this series, it is a piston gun. So you guys know a piston gun and there's a DI gun. That's pretty much the only two ARs. If there is another AR out there, I haven't heard of it, whatever. Straight pull bolt action ARs. I did a video on one, duh. Anyways, the 416. So it's a very interesting platform. Now, the first thing that you notice when you look at this gun is the receiver is a little bit taller. Like, why is that? It kind of looks pretty cool, and it feels, it's got its own built-in riser, you know? That's pretty nice. You don't necessarily need the unity mounts to get your optics higher up in the air sometimes, but that is all there just to clear that big piston system on the front of the gun. So that piston system is essentially the same thing from the G36C that they took and put onto an AR kind of platform to make it a little bit more familiar and, well, look a lot more like their M16 counterparts that were here in the United States. And don't ever underestimate how good a firearm looks when selling equipment to the US military. So, a very reliable platform. Now, a lot of dudes in Special Forces picked these weapons up. We really didn't see these things make their way into like conventional troops until, yeah, pretty much the Marine Corps. They're the only folks issuing these things in large numbers, pretty much exclusive to special operations. In most particular, DEVGRU and all the other SEAL teams. They were very heavily used by these guys. Not exactly sure why they decided to go this route when, you know, Army counterparts weren't exactly fielding them in nearly as large numbers, but it's all a matter of preference. And, well, when you guys have the budget during the global war on terror that some of these guys do, well, yeah, they're just gonna ball out, bro, and just play with all the cool stuff. So they mainly ran this gun. This gun is very, very popular. This gun is very famous. Robert O'Neill carried a 416. Here's a picture of his gun. Pretty dope, right? So the 416. Moving on, we said, hey, this Block 1, wouldn't it be nice if we had just a little bit longer rail on here so we can get more cool stuff on here? We can get a flashlight on here and we can get that PEC on here without sacrificing too much rail space on your hand. You quad rail guys, rise up, squad. But it was a pretty tremendous improvement over the Block 1. So we had a system that was a little bit better gas with a better gas system on it. We had a rail that actually went out to the muzzle device versus the old Mod Zeros that had them recessed before the front sight post. So we did lose a couple inches there of valuable rail space. Now, you have to understand that they need their laser aiming modules on there and they need their weapon mounted lights on there. It's not optional. It's absolutely mandatory because, again, 9 times out of 10, these guys, they're operating under darkness. Being able to aim your weapon at night under night vision goggles is not a superpower. It is a superpower. So, guys, we've given these guys a rundown here. We're going to talk about exactly how these guns fit, how they feel, and just how well they run. Now, we're going to measure this on a couple different things. Guys, we're going to talk about accuracy on them. We're going to talk about the fit and finish. And of course, we're going to talk about just reliability and just how they feel when they're being ran. Now, when it comes to accuracy, when it comes to these CQBRs, the close quarter battle receivers, that's not your ideal weapon when you are talking about just a general purpose rifle. You want something more like a 14.5. And the reason being is with the extra muzzle velocity of a longer barrel, you are going to hit your targets at longer ranges more repeatedly and more consistently. So yeah, the 10.3s, the 10.5, guys, they lack some muzzle velocity, but that doesn't mean that they're just 100-yard guns or 200-yard guns. Guys, we made reliable hits with all of these platforms out to 450 and 500 yards. After that, they really fall off. And in fact, 500 yards, I wasn't stressing, but it becomes definitely a little more difficult, to say the least, especially than something like a 14.5, which can easily make hits at that 500-yard mark pretty much all day, even with a not so great optic. So, accuracy-wise, here's the thing. They all did very well. All of these guns with match ammo were right around 1.5 MOA. And when we're talking a CQBR, you really can't ask for much more. And you know, guys, we're not using big magnified optics when we're shooting these groups. These are just red dots and of course the LCAM there. So it's pretty much, yeah, these are all very acceptably accurate. None of them excelled in that group, but none of them fell flat on their face and shot, you know, minute of barn angles. They were all right around 1.5 MOA. So none of them excelled there. So let's talk about the looks of these weapons. Of course, that's very subjective, you know. Objectively, all of these guns are beautiful. All of these guns are really cool looking. So it kind of comes down to availability and then price. So when we're talking price, yeah, some of them are more expensive than others. Actually, only one is extremely more expensive than the others, and it's the HK416. Mostly because, guys, the parts, they're just very difficult to source. So what we have seen a lot of builds coming from is pretty much law enforcement trade-ins. So what happens is the law enforcement, of course, they can get whatever they want because they're cool or whatever. So they get them. The 416 uppers, those get traded into local gun shops, local gun stores and things like that who order new guns for them. Now, what's dope is they have to destroy the receivers. Actually, that's not dope. That sucks. That is infringement on our God-given rights. I am serious about that. But the uppers, well, they are available. So that's cool. That's probably your best place to start, is to getting one of those 2003 to 2008 manufacture uppers from places like, I think, Blue Mountain Supply or Blue Mountain State Supply. I can't remember it. But there's a lot of places online that retail these uppers. They get them in large quantities. And a lot of police forces, well, they're getting near the end of their service life. So they're just like, we're going to sell these things. We're going to get brand new ones. So at the moment, there's not necessarily a shortage of them out there, but there is a finite amount, which of course makes them cost a lot of money. Now, I've seen these things ranging from $3,000 to $4,500 for just the upper receiver group. That is, yeah, that's pricey. That's very pricey. And in fact, it kind of really makes me never want to build a 416 clone because of how pricey that is. But here we are, me and my bullshit. Like, I'm not that smart, guys. I'm not an intelligent human being. I spend that kind of money on guns like this for you guys, but I love you. Anyways, that's probably your best way to go. Now, there's surplus parts out there that you can kind of assemble your own. There's barrels, there's some of the piston systems. You can find the rails, old Remington defense rails. HK makes them, Geisley makes them, but those are kind of hard to find. Of course, they're very expensive. Now, compare that to their counterparts, the Mark 18, the Mod 0, and the Mod 1, or the Block 2. Yeah, they are significantly cheaper. The Block 1, the Mod 0. So I would say that's your cheapest one to build. They require the Knights rails, the Knights RAS system rails. They used to be extremely plentiful. Like, they couldn't give those things away. You could get those all today for like $100. Now they kind of range like $250 to $350 depending on condition, which kind of, that's That's pretty standard for that rail system. And it's a good rail system. In fact, it's a fantastic rail system. We still use it today. This rail is what is exclusively used on this weapon. Now, it's a great, very aesthetic, very simple, straightforward quad rail. Guys, there's 4 sections of quads of rails. Like, heck yeah, dog. Here's the only thing that I don't like about the Mod 0 is that you just have a lot of limited rail space. So, as you can see in the video here, I look cramped, and to be quite frank, I feel kind of cramped. Now, when I have the period correct light on there, and then I've got the broom handle and the PEC 15 on top, and then you have that front sight post right there in front where the rail ends, yeah, you're kind of just really cramped. So you kind of have to use that modified C-clamp and use the broom handle as more of an angled foregrip versus actually like holding it like a broom handle. So it's a little frustrating just because it feels good and it's very light. It's definitely very, very light, and it feels and it swings fantastic. But yeah, I wish I had a little bit more rail space on it, but that's okay. So right around $1,000, these things come in retail wise. So there's companies like Thoroughbred Armament, Little Bird Procurement. There's a bunch of companies out there that sell these guns that they actually slap together. They take Colt receivers. That's usually the base point for it. Colt receiver, you got the Knights rail, a Colt SOCOM profile barrel, and then, yeah, the Knights rail. And you're usually, yeah, you're pretty much there. So it feels great. It's just very nimble, and it's very light, and it's balanced extremely well because you have a lot of that weight just right in the center of the firearm. It's not in the rear, it's not in the front, it's not a front heavy firearm at all. It's all just like right there, and it just feels, yeah, it feels pretty solid. Now, the Block 2 Mark 18s, these are peak. These are peak aesthetic. These are beautiful weapons. Now, the Daniel Defense rails, that tasteful, whatever, burnt bronze, flat dark earth, that is a very well put together firearm. And I think we had a lot of development going into that because the Block 1s, the Mod 0s, those weren't exactly just slapped together, but yeah, kind of. There were a ton of just chopped barrel 14.5s. In fact, that's exactly how they started out, was just chopped barrel 14.5s and put all together because, hey, we need something short. The Block 2s, these guns were built, purpose-built for this role, and they feel good. And because they're purpose-built like that, yeah, they're going to perform extremely well. So when it comes to cloning, like which one you should build, well, I'm just going to lay this out objectively for you guys, and then I'll kind of weigh in on what I think. So the Mod 0, like, man, it's beautiful. The Block 1s, they're hot. Like, you have the front sight post, man, like, it's the short Knights rail. You have all the heavy hitters of the early GWOT era days carrying these things. Like, they're just dope. They're rad. And I would say it's probably the cheapest one to actually build if you are crafty with sourcing your parts. These, if you build them and source the parts, again, crafty, you can get these things right in like $650 to $750 if you try really hard, but typically you're going to have like $850 to $900 wrapped up into this build. When it comes to the Block 2 Mark 18, so there's brand new manufacturer rails that are technically clone correct. There's also surplus rails that are absolutely clone correct. And there's whole surplus uppers that are clone correct. So it's very difficult to price that out. Now, you can buy them direct from Daniel Defense. However, that will not be a clone correct build. And don't you worry, the clone guys will tell you that you are definitely wrong for calling out a Mark 18. You have a Colt receiver. You have either a Daniel Defense barrel, a Colt barrel. There were some FN barrels, I believe, as well. But there's a lot of variance in the barrels for the Block 2s. Also, you have a little bit more leeway with which muzzle device that you want to run. On the Block 1s, the Mod 0s, those typically almost exclusively use NT4 flash hiders on them, just because the Surefire RC2 was not in production yet. We hadn't adopted it. So really, the only suppressor that most people used on those were Knights Armament NT4s, which makes that build much more expensive. Why more expensive? Because it's got Knights Armament on, and it's going to cost you $1 bajillion for the little muzzle device, and probably $50 bajillion for the correct suppressor. So that's cool. Thanks, Knights Armament. But with the Block 2, you have a lot more leeway. You can run that NT4 on there if you want to go super goose, or if you want to go old school. But the RC2 is probably most prevalent on those. In fact, I would say definitely more prevalent. So the RC2 muzzle devices, those are much more prevalent. Those are very easy to get. They're RC2 suppressors, yeah, super easy to get, and also much, much cheaper. So if you're talking about price between them all, HK's out of the picture, like crazy expensive, $3,000 for the uppers, like dog, that's a lot of money. The Block 2s, I would say if you're crafty enough, you can get those absolutely the cheapest. There's no doubt about that, especially if you source all the right parts from the right people and just kind of get the deals. But typically, if you want to buy one that a company has put together to make clone correct, you're spending right around $1,000 for that as well. Sometimes up to $1,200, depending on what quality of parts you have go in it, and just the amount of effort that goes into making it perfectly clone correct. Shooting this gun, it feels a lot like just the Mod 0, but it's very strange, and it could just have been mine. It's a little harsh on recoil, and it's kind of overgassed. So I ran these guns all with the same suppressor on them, the Knight's Armament NT4 suppressor. So each of them got that at some point in time. In the video, we didn't run it with the NT4 suppressor just because I wanted to show how short they are, but they each got that same treatment. And I'm going to be honest, I think the Block 2 Mark 18 was definitely the most overgassed. It felt overgassed. That's just all there is to it. It was, the recoil was definitely a little bit more harsh than the Mod 0. And it was just a touch more snappy. It shot great. It felt great. It's a very nimble firearm. Again, it's good. It's well balanced, but it's a little more front heavy, especially with that suppressor, than I would say the Mod 0. Now let's talk about the HK416. So the 416, I'm probably going to catch a little bit of grief over this, but that's okay. I genuinely think the 416 is a miserable shooting firearm. It's absolutely miserable. First of all, it's heavy. Once you get a can on it, you get your laser, your light, your optic, it becomes a very heavy platform. Like this thing is over 10 pounds when you get this thing fully kitted. That's a heavy gun. And especially when you consider what its true capabilities are. It's a 10.5-inch firearm. That's not exactly what I would call a general purpose rifle. In fact, hits beyond 500 yards, absolutely can it be done? Sure. On a super regular basis with a normal marksman, not really. It's pretty difficult. And the actual terminal ballistics beyond 300 yards it's kind of abysmal. That's just not ideal. So we have this super short rifle that is limited in range and it's super heavy. Like, okay, just go hit the gym. Yeah, like obviously hit the gym. Everybody should hit the gym. You guys should all get Fit Kings. But there is still nothing great about a 10-pound rifle. But does the rifle perform a pound better than the other counterparts? In my opinion, the answer is absolutely not. First, the 416, whether it is suppressed or unsuppressed, this gun has a rather harsh recoil. Now, 5.56 doesn't have recoil. It's a very, very soft shooting gun. You guys have shot AR-15s. Recoil is non-existent. But I'm not kidding. It makes it a little bit more prevalent, and it's very interesting because I played with a bunch of different buffers actually. When I bought my parts kit, it came with the supplied HK buffer. I tried an H3 and also an H2, and it really didn't make much difference. In fact, I actually went so high in weight that I made the gun inoperable unless there was a suppressor on it, and it was still just like, it was a little harsh. It was just really right in your face, and it's because of that piston system. There's a lot more moving mass back into your shoulder, and when you have a short firearm like that, there's just not as much place to displace all of that energy, and it goes into you. And I think there's the overall feeling and shooting of that firearm suffers because of that piston system. In fact, I don't really feel like it solves any real problem. In no way, shape, or form are DI guns failing at such an outstanding rate that the piston system solves all problems there. And yeah, it's just, I think the piston system on such a short firearm like that just doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense. Now, people will call me crazy for saying that. I don't really care. It's the most expensive one out of the entire group. In fact, HK pretty much makes some of the most expensive rifles on the market, period. Doesn't make me dislike HK or anything. I, in fact, love their 417. Their 416, it's just such a miserable shooting experience. And I cannot describe to you guys how overgassed that platform is. Holy bejeebus. Like, especially with the suppressor on that gun, holy cow. Like, it's hard to make it through a full mag without, you know, a little bit of tears going. I'm wearing my glasses. It doesn't matter. It's coming underneath of it, dude. Just like right in my eyeballs. Like, that sucks. Like, it sucks. It's just a miserable shooting experience. And I cannot stress it enough how miserable of a shooting experience it is. Especially like for those dudes way back when, like when we didn't have all of these fancy new flow through and reduced back pressure suppressors, like, it kind of sucked. So in my opinion, we're going to put the HK at number 3 because it's the most expensive and, in my opinion, the absolute most miserable shooting experience I've had with just about any firearm. I don't like it. It's just, the juice ain't worth the squeeze, dog. So it becomes down to the last two. We have the Block 1 and the Block 2, the Mod 0 and Mod 1. So this is ultimately going to be, subjective, and because I think they both performed very, very well. And I think both of them are very reliable platforms. They're both very purpose built, and they both excelled at the jobs they did. Really, the only true huge improvement between Block 1 and Block 2 is just the rail system. You throw that rail on the Block 1 and, well, you kind of have the Block 2. It's just a different gas block and so on and so forth. But of those two, I think I have to go with the Mod 0. And simply because it's just such peak global war on terror aesthetics. Like, it's slightly dated looking, but it's not dated. I mean, let's be real, like, those firearms are still extremely relevant today, and you can still do a tremendous amount of work today with it. Yeah, are you sacrificing a little bit of rail space on it? Sure, but is it unusable because of that front sight post? Absolutely not. And you back up iron sight, guys. Can't break that iron sight. No getting rid of that one unless you want to, you know, get your Dremel out and sandpaper that bad area off. But yeah, you back up iron sight, folks. Major dub for you guys. So, but the Mod 1, the Block 2, I really like that firearm. It feels great. It's a very solid fit and finish. They're great firearms, and we still use them today. They're starting to be phased out for the URGIs, but they're still out there, and they're a fantastic firearm. But if I had to pick one, just for the sake of global war on terror, it's going to be the Mod 0. So gentlemen, we have a wrap on CQBR Battle Royale. I appreciate you guys tuning in. We will catch you next week. And remember, run your gun and not your mouth.